Alrighty, we are back again, and today, feeling a little starstruck. Somebody that I had envisioned very early on when I was daydreaming about this podcast having on, I threw an almost joking comment out on social media when she made a comment. I was like, "Oh, you should come on my podcast. I'd love to talk to you about that." And she was like, "Yeah, let's do that." So, Dona Sarkar, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm never joking about coming on your podcast, but it's a fascinating concept because I admire you so much and everything you've done. And you're saying, no, I'm nervous to have you on my podcast. So it's just
shaking right
no,
now.
I'm just saying it's a good message where you never know what people think about you. You just have no idea, right?
I just figured I was your husband's ding dong buddy. And
You are also my husband's ding dong buddy. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
It's an and.
Yeah. Why can't it be both?
I know.
So ultimately today, what I wanted to talk with you about was your comment about imposter syndrome.
Awesome.
And, I looked up, and if you folks aren't familiar with Dona Sarkar, please do Google her, and we'll have to clarify for you. You're going to find 4 different people. You're going to find somebody who's been very involved in a big wig at Microsoft. That is Dona Sarkar that you're hearing right now. There's a pretty profound public speaker that goes all over the world talking about all kinds of great topics. That is also Dona Sarkar. We've got a screwing my words up, but a new fashion company, Prima Dona Studios, is up and running now.
Yep.
You'll find lots of your fashion design work, all of that. Yeah, but you're the same person and you do all of these
Don't
things.
forget the published
Oh
author.
my goodness. Yeah. And an author. 4, 5 books?
9, right?
It's like 8, 9. I think. I don't know. But I had
Yeah.
fiction too. I had fiction too before I knew you.
So
Yeah.
let's start with that. How does that happen? Like, did 12 or 15-year-old Dona Sarkar think, I'm going to have a giant career in tech and be a bigwig, and at the same time, I'm going to run a fashion studio. I'm going to, how does that work?
Okay, so first, I'm a medium wig. Like, let's just leave it there. But okay, I do believe this is true, where most people have no idea what their journey is going to look like. And when people see kind of the middle or the end of the journey, they imagine that you have a very good idea of where you are going to go at the beginning. And that is just not true. This is not like road tripping with a map. It's road tripping, you're with Sacagawea exploring the Wild West, not having any idea
Totally unknown.
where the ocean is, right? So when I was young, I grew up, no, let's be clear, like pretty poor in downtown Detroit. My parents are both working class, immigrants to the U.S., go immigrants. They worked full time, they went to school full time, and I watched my sister and myself. So when we would come home in Detroit, Michigan, we'd walk home from school, and the safest place in the world was the library. So we would go to Detroit Public Library, and I would read, and she would read, and we'd hang out till my parents came home, and then we'd go home. Now, if you do that in 2022, when this podcast is being recorded, your parents are going to go to jail. You will be in foster care, and the library will get shut down.
Yeah.
These are all true. But, in Detroit in 1989, that was very, very normal. And all of you Gen Xers, you feel me right now, because we were just talking before, go play outside till the streetlights come on.
Yeah.
Come home at dinner. Don't come home at all. It doesn't matter. Just this over sheltering of children, just based on what's going on in the world. It's just a different time. So I can't imagine anyone really in modern USA having those freedoms as they had before, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. But so back to answering your question, I had no idea what adulting was going to look like. No idea. And I don't think any of us knew, right? No one in this room had any idea what our lives would turn out like. So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I knew that the only solution to getting out of poverty was education and having very practical jobs that make a lot of money. And that was it. I knew that.
Doctor, lawyer, all the classic.
Exactly. So, to be clear, immigrant mentality is you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, a business person. These are the options.
These are what you can do.
These are what you can do. You're not going to be a fashion designer. You're not going to be a public speaker. You're not going to be an author. You're not going to be an artist. Those are all exciting side things to do. But as a profession, you have exactly 4 choices. And all of you Asian people out there are laughing because you know it's true. So if you're number one, you're going to be a doctor. If you're not smart enough to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer. If you're not smart enough to be a lawyer, you're going to be an engineer. If you're not smart enough engineering, you can be a business person. But that's it. The line ends there, right?
We're done.
At that point, you know, business person also a little dubious, like what kind of business? So when it was time for me to graduate high school and start looking at college, my dad was like, he's hardcore feminist, believes that women should make all the money because they make better choices.
True.
You know, he was
Hallelujah.
Yeah, hallelujah, right? So he was raised by his mother primarily, and she started her own business when she was 20 years old. She ran it till she was 80 until she died. Wow. She ran her own. Ran her own, you know, clothing shop. And she raised 4 children and every street dog with this income. So he grew up very much with this mindset of like women are the people who earn a living. And I can't even tell you men out there what a difference it makes, especially for daughters, to send that message out there into the world, is to be so clear that your daughter is powerful and a money-making genius from day one.
Yep.
It makes the biggest difference, I think, in women's lives is to hear that from men from an early age.
Coming on early.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when it was time for me to go to college, we would actively read the Wall Street Journal. He's like, okay, we have to figure out a degree for you. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be a doctor. I tried that. So I went to do a volunteer thing in high school, and it was open heart surgery day. And it turns out either you faint or you don't faint. And if you faint at open heart surgery, you should not be a doctor. So
you're not a doctor.
I was fully in the fainting during open heart surgery category of humans. And I said, well, he's like, well, we're not doing that. Cross that off. Lawyer requires a lot of reading and regurgitating information. I can't even remember my zip code, so maybe not that one. Cross that off the list. Now we're at the engineer portion. Remember, it's doctor, lawyer, engineer, business person. He's like, all right, let's go with engineering. Let's try if this will stick. So we're reading Wall Street Journal one day, old school, and he said, who are these guys? And I look, and it's 2 people named Larry and Sergey. And they were starting a little company called Google, which is a search engine on the internet thing. And he said, these people are their own boss. They're going to be valuated for $1 billion. How is that possible? I said, I don't know. One of them went to University of Michigan, where I was going to be
Right
attending.
down the street.
Right here. So I'd gotten into University of Michigan. He said, if this guy can go to University of Michigan and be a billionaire, you could definitely do it. Women are smarter than men. So obviously, this is what the future holds. So thank you, Larry and Sergey, for being amazing role models. Also going to University of Michigan. So this was the dad's vision. He's like, you're going to do this. And I said, okay, cool. What is this? He said, I don't know. So we dig in. We're like, okay, computer science seems to be the future, right? Never mind, neither of us know what this is. Okay, we have no clue, 0. So I enroll in computer science, show up at University of Michigan, day 1, never actually having programmed, to be clear, right? It's not like we had one and I've been coding since I was 8. It wasn't a thing in Detroit. We didn't have computer science. We didn't have AP computer science. We didn't have code.org, none of the newfangled things that...
Typing class, and that was about it.
Exactly. So I knew how to type on a typewriter with like whiteout, right? Yeah, that is how I learned to type. So I show up, University of Michigan. It's called EECS 100, Electrical Engineering Computer Science. 100, okay. So you think 100 level is going to be 100 level. This is a lie at the University of Michigan. So roll in, day 1 is, this is a computer. Here's all the parts. And I say, okay, cool. I copiously take notes. It's a huge class, 500 people. You can imagine how many guys there are, 490. Right? So I'm sitting in the front row, copiously taking notes, like, okay, I got this. It seems to be okay, day 1. Day 2, welcome to binary programming. Today we're going to program in binary and you're going to turn in an assignment tonight. And I'm like, what is binary? So it went from what is a computer to binary programming in 24 hours.
In 2 classes.
Yeah. So already on day 2, I have no idea what's going on. And here's the kicker. I was one of few. Everybody in the back is like, this is boring. Why aren't we doing harder stuff? I already learned this in AP Computer Science. And at this point, I raised my hand like, what the hell is AP Computer Science?
Yeah.
So it was a very shell-shocked, like, okay, I guess I'm going to fail at this, need to drop out moment, right?
Was this the first instance of imposter syndrome?
It was the very first instance of, I definitely do not belong in this room.
Yep.
And when you have 490 voices telling you you don't belong in this room, not openly, like, Donna, you don't belong in this room, but they're all saying this is easy and I have no idea what the words
What
are.
were we even talking about?
Right? I'm having to look up these words, like, what is binary? What does that mean? 1, 0. What are ones? What are zeros? So I look around some of the other people who look shell shocked and realize, okay, there's like 7 people here who don't know what they're doing and everyone else knows. So we formed a bond. We're like, okay, we're going to form a crew, us people who don't know what they're doing. In fact, this is a stupid idea. Form a crew with people who know what they're doing, not a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing.
Pro tip.
Exactly. So we go to office hours and we say, we have a question. What is binary? And the teacher's assistant's like, how do you not know what that is? We were like, this is 100. Of course we don't know. So, fast forward, we all failed. Failed. There's no comeback story. This is not like Rocky or any of the sports movies. There's no comeback here. We did not actually do well. All of us who didn't know what we were doing failed horribly. And we all had a life choice at this point, which is quit this industry. Don't be Larry and Sergey. And for me, it was, all right, I guess we try business next. Or, do the thing that I usually did when I failed at something, which is do it again.
Keep trying.
Do it one more time. I remembered when I was learning to ride a bicycle. I'm not the most coordinated person, to be clear. So when I was learning to ride a bicycle, fell off the first day, fell off the second day, also fell off the third day, fell off the fourth day. And on the 5th day, I was able to stay on for exactly 7 minutes. That was a miracle. So I thought, I can probably do this EECS 100 one more time and give it another shot. Because now I know what binary is. And maybe I can overcome my next challenge. So I convinced 4 out of the 7 people to do it again.
Oh.
And we re-enrolled. And even at this point, my dad, who's wonderful, is like, all right, we go again, right? I'm like, okay, let's go again. So we did it again. And that time I did not fail. I got a C+, which is much better than an F.
Yeah. Hey.
But most importantly, it was passing.
Yeah.
Then it was like, all right, I still don't belong here, but I didn't belong a little less than before. And ultimately that became my motto, suck less next time. It's not a very good motto, but it kind of works.
Yeah, ours is be less unsuccessful.
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. It's like suck a little bit less next time. So it's do the thing 5 times and you will be less bad with each iteration.
Yep.
So that was kind of how computer science happened. And there was, to be clear, quite a bit of I failed this, took it again, passed, failed this, took it again, passed. And I am not one of those people who's like, oh yeah, it was amazing. The best 4 years of my life, would do again. I'm like, no, hell no. Get me a job, right? So I can apply these skills in some useful way and someone pays me money versus me paying college money to suffer. Yeah. So that was computer science. And it's now, this is really special because it's year 20 of being in tech. Like June 2002 was my very first job. And now we're at June 2022.
20 years.
20 years of survival, right? It's really a survival game. But eventually the impostering goes away when you do that thing so many times. You can't imposter anymore. You just know how to do it.
I've been doing it a lot.
So after you do something, I swear, 5 is the magic number for me. For others, it'll be different. Once I do something 5 times, I'm like, yeah, I'm no longer impostering about this. I can pretty much do it. It's muscle memory.
I suck a lot less.
A lot less.
At least 5x less.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But that's when people start saying things to you like, oh, you're such a natural. And I have to laugh and laugh and laugh. Like, you didn't see the first time.
Yeah. I worked hard to get to here.
I worked real hard to not be bad at this. Yeah.
So, you go and finish up college, jump into the tech game, because I failed out of, CS 101, day one, basically. And did you land at Microsoft right off the bat or were you?
No, I didn't. So the economy was total shit in 2002 when I graduated. And I had a job offer from 2 places. And they were extremely sketchy. One was the Goodyear Tire Factory in Akron, Ohio. Right? And it was not a computer job. It was legitimately making tires. I'm not even joking. So making tires. Second one was with the NSA to do something dubious. And that involved getting, your eyeball scanned and lie detector. And they're going to pay you $20,000 a year. So that was the second. And my parents were like, all right. Looks like you're going to be broke. Fair. All right. Thank God this computer science degree led to billions. We're like, okay, you're going to have to live at home under the ping pong table until further notice, right? This is the strategy. We're like, okay, we're going to have to live in Michigan. Okay. And then I got an offer from this company called Siebel Systems. They do CRM software, customer relationship management, from a weird little city on the West Coast called Bellevue, Washington. And I'm like, I don't know what CRM means. Look that up. What is Siebel? What is Bellevue? How much you want to pay me? Okay, I'll take it. right? It was that. It was
Yep.
this salary will help me pay off these student loans I have because, see, I come from non-wealthy parents. So pretty much it was, I bet I can pay off my student loans in 10 years if I work at this company for 10 years.
Where do I sign?
That's it. Where do I sign? By the way, I didn't know you're supposed to negotiate to get a signing bonus. Like all this
Yeah.
newfangled stuff that people are like, oh, how much was your signing bonus? I'm like, what's that word?
What are you talking about?
Right. What was your stock options? What is that word? All I know is people pay you money every month and you do a job.
Yeah.
Right.
Seemed like a very large number.
It was a
so-
very large number. It was more than I've ever seen, and definitely more than anyone in Detroit, Michigan's ever seen. Right.
Yeah,
West
you're
Coast salary.
Sounds great.
So I signed without knowing anything. Like, rent in Washington State costs 10 times more than Detroit, for example. Just like basic life things. So I signed, moved here. Siebel was definitely not the company for me, but it was a good starter job.
Yep.
Got started. They actually got bought by Oracle, and they have a layoff culture. So once you get to year 3, they lay people off. It's just part of their turnover where they bring in new people and lay off anyone who's been there 3 years or more. So
They don't even factor in like performance or
no.
oh.
So it's layoff culture. It's a very, very weird company. Not Oracle. This was Siebel. But they were like, okay, let's just keep doing layoff culture. And I was coming up on year 3. I'm like, okay. But they did.
have what I think most anybody would call a very successful career at Microsoft. I know quite a bit, and we can dig into that too. But you're doing great at Microsoft, obviously. Now the books.
The books. Yeah.
Did that start before? Was that at the same time?
So I love that you're asking this question because most people assume that everything is successful at the same time. And in fact, the concept of success in more than one thing is more juggling than it is being good at the same time. So here's what I mean by that. When I first joined Siebel, I was one of very few young people in the office. A lot of people were like, yeah, I got to get home to, my family and do all this. So here's me, woman, alone in Washington State. I don't know anyone here. There's no friends, no one to talk to. So I'd go home at 6 o'clock and just kind of sit there in my apartment. It was no good. So I remember someone gave me the advice like, oh, you should join clubs or take courses and you'll make friends. I'm like, okay, cool. It's gonna be great. And in college, I'd taken like a pottery class, like really basic, and I was really bad. So I thought, oh, I bet I could be good at pottery someday. So I looked up pottery classes, Bellevue, Washington, Bellevue Community College, now called Bellevue College. So I signed up for pottery class. It was like adult education, whatever. So I show up there day 1, pottery's canceled. Why? Because no one does pottery as an adult. That's not a thing. It's not a common thing that they offer, right? It's a very specialized, you go glass, to a place with a kiln and stuff. You don't do this in a classroom.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. So pottery's canceled. I'm devastated because I'm back to, having no friends. And the lady at the register office looks at me and she's like, my God, you pathetic loser. And she's like, this was your plan to make friends, make pottery? And I said, kind of. And she said, okay, you know what's open? Fiction writing. It's open. It's right there. They're starting. There's a bunch of people in there. I'm like, fiction writing? That sounds like homework. She said, do you want to make friends? Yes or no? I said, okay, fine. She said, look, you got nothing going on, lady. It's 6 o'clock on a Tuesday and your hopes and dreams were pinned on pottery. Go to fiction writing. I'm like, fine. So I go to fiction writing. I'm sulky, right? Because I'm 22. I'm still a teenager mentally. I'm like, I don't want to do fiction writing. It's a homework. Okay. So I'm standing in the back and people start reading pieces they've written. And I realized like, oh, this is the carryover where people take it over and over and over again because they come in, read their stories, they get feedback from the room, they write more chapters. So everyone in class kind of wrote a chapter every week and few brave people raised their hands, got feedback, but it was a very supportive room. So they said, oh, I didn't get quite that character. I didn't know where they were. Like, what was their motivation? I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. So I showed up again the following Tuesday because I wanted to see the end of the story these people are reading. And you get hooked because you're hearing like 7 different people's stories, all fiction. And I kept showing up week after week after week. And on week 4, the teacher finally says, are you going to bring something? I said, no. And that was never part of the deal.
I'm
And
just
she
here to hear
said,
cool stories.
yeah, she said, if you ever change your mind, you should bring something. And I said, okay, yeah, if I ever change my mind, I'll bring something. And then I went home and said, okay, I don't know any of these people. They don't know who I am. They don't know my name. I don't know their name. Maybe I can write a story. So I wrote an amazingly fictional story about a woman who moves to Bellevue, Washington and has no friends and has fantastical adventures. It was very bad. So I bring in this chapter thinking it's going to be like the great American novel, right? It's going to be very serious, very literary. And everyone in class is laughing and they're like, my God, you are funny. I said, no, I'm not. They said, no, you really are very funny. I said, no, I'm not funny at all. It's a tragedy. They said,
But it makes me laugh.
Yeah, I know. So I read my chapter out loud and everyone is laughing. They said, you have such a great voice for women's fiction. And I said, what the hell is that? They said, that is a genre that makes trillions of dollars a year. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
I'm listening.
I like this. At the time, you know, I liked my job, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to get laid off in 2 years. I better have a backup plan. So I said, all right, cool. So I bring in another chapter. And next thing I know, I've written an entire novel in a semester. And the very last thing that we cover is how to get a literary agent. You go to a conference, meet up, book publishers, the whole thing. It was a very good class, by the way, very good. So I said, okay, I'll go do this. So I go to a conference. I did not, you know, spoiler alert, didn't get a lit agent, but I learned a lot about the industry.
Yep.
A lot. And I made a ton of writer friends, many of whom I'm friends with to this day. First book, didn't know literary agent. I wrote another, got interest from agents. I signed with one agent. Third book, agent represented me, nothing happened. Fourth book, we got a book deal from Random House. Yeah. But it took 4 books, right? And this is my do the thing 5 times policy. It's
just, but
do the thing.
Literally, so your author career kicked off because you were bored and lonely in Bellevue with your tech jobs.
That's exactly it. Yeah. But so
Wow.
the staggering is really important, right? So I started in tech in 2002. I joined Microsoft in 2005. I got my book deal in 2007. And my book came out in 2008. So these don't happen at the same time. I think people are always like, how do you do all these at the same time? I say you don't. You really do have to stagger. So when you think about juggling, step 1 is you throw the ball from one hand to the other, right? Unless you can like actually
Do
catch
that successfully.
this. Yeah, you're not going to be a juggling expert. So once you can actually throw this ball and catch it, then once you can do that without even thinking, that's when you can add a second, right? And once you can add a second and you can do that without thinking, then you can add a third. And the issue is that people try to, let's say, oh, I'm going to juggle 5 things. Why am I bad at this? I said, because you've not done it long enough.
You went from 0 to hero.
Exactly, overnight. But I really do think that's the key that everyone forgets is do the thing until you don't suck at it before adding another thing. So that was it. Once I got good at tech, good at quote, then I could go pursue my publishing career. And the exact same thing for fashion. I was in my publishing career, fully in, loved it. I was writing fiction. I knew how to write fiction. I had an agent. I was selling books. But I was really, really tired around 2012 of just kind of everything. I was hitting a wall when it came to just like life and work. I had a job I didn't love. Publishing was like, okay, I've written fiction for a long time. Do I want to write fiction forever? And I decided I wanted to do something away from a screen altogether, right? Because my day job was looking at a screen, writing's looking at a screen. So I found randomly when I was walking around in Ballard, a fashion school. And I'd watched way too much Project Runway at this point, right? All of us have watched way too much. And I'm like, look at this, making a ball gown out of Christmas trees. I can do this in my sleep. We say with a lot of confidence, knowing we cannot actually do this. So I just enrolled myself. I said, I'm going to go. So I show up and ask a question like, what do you need to know? They said, well, you need to know how to sew. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know that. They're like, you need to know how to do pattern making. I'm like, well, I also don't know that. They're like, what do you know how to do? I'm like, so none of this, but I'll figure it out. So it came down to it. I had a month to figure it out. So I went to a fabric store on Cap Hill in Seattle called Stitches, and I hired an instructor. It turns out, where do you find a sewing instructor? At a fabric store. So I went there. I said, can you recommend someone who could teach me to sew in a month? And they said yes. So they gave me a contact info, went to sewing class 3 days a week in the evening, finished work, zipped across, learned to sew, learned to read a pattern, learned to make a pattern. Then I was ready. But, the first thing I sewed was hideous. See, do the thing 5 times. It was very bad. And my husband can attest. He's like, did you do this by yourself? I said, you can't tell. He said, oh, okay. And note to self, like his mother is a quilter. She's an expert sewer. He's been sewing since he was 5, but I've never touched a sewing machine in my life. So I had to learn in a great big hurry, but it did teach me a really important thing, which is when you need to learn something really fucking fast, you will learn it real fucking fast.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
You had to learn podcasting really fucking fast, right?
I'm also finding a lot of the imposter syndrome and challenge. Like everything I'm looking at, it's just like, there's a mess here. There's a mess here. I got to figure this out.
Yeah. But it's so true. Where running into imposter syndrome and overcoming that thing will make you so much more competent, right? So I learned to sew in a month, went to fashion school, and I didn't actually do anything useful with it for years and years and years until, I had a point of view to start my company. So I went in 2012. I didn't start my company until 2019.
Yep.
So again, that was 7 years, right? Everyone sees the end result and thinks it's an overnight success. But the last time I did something new was, being a published author in 2007, starting my company in 2019. This is 12 years apart.
That's a lot of time.
Right? It's a lot of time. So I think the issue that people see is like, oh, you do all these things, you must have been good from the beginning. But looking at this 20-year history, that's a really long time to devote yourself to a thing.
It actually makes a lot more sense to me now, like talking this through with you, because I have always looked at it that way. As long as I've known you, it's like, you're brilliant at 4 things. Like nobody can do that. We all have the same 168 hours in a week. Like, how do you get so much done? And I guess it's, like you said, that, what's that book? The Atomic Habits.
That's right.
It's that just, little bits over and over again.
Over and over.
Build those habits, get better and better.
Also, I really want to talk about this concept of graduating, where we as adults get into this, once you graduate college, probably, or high school, you forget about graduating. And everything you pick up, you feel like you have to do for the rest of your life. Right. So, for example, people are like, oh, I quit that job. I'm like, no, you graduated the job because you are now done with it.
I like that.
You've done it for a long time. Leave the vacant seat so you can move on. Because if you don't graduate high school, someone can't come and fill that seat, right? If you don't graduate college, well, you're going to be there forever. Someone can't fill that spot. Same thing with graduating jobs. Same with graduating relationships. Same with graduating hobbies, side hustles, everything, right? I've quit fiction writing, graduated. I've done that for years. It was very enjoyable, but I can't see myself doing that anymore. But people are like, oh, you've quit fiction writing. I said, no, I graduated. I did it. I know I can do it. And now I'm ready to vacate that seat for some other author on HarperCollins's radar, Random House's radar, so I can move on and do something else. So it's a real concept that we forget as soon as we hit like age 22, this concept of graduating. So when you're thinking about leaving a job or leaving a relationship or leaving a friendship or whatever it is, don't say you're quitting, say you're graduating. And that keeps it from being a forever thing. We get suckered into, if I started, I have to do it forever. I said, why? You didn't go to high school forever, right? No, that would be awful.
Well, I think it's important too, just I'm starting to recognize in my life the power of shifting your lexicon.
Right.
The words that you
Yes.
If you sit here and say like, I suck at this, I can't do this, it's never going to happen.
No.
But when suddenly you're like, well, I'm going to go and do this one thing.
That's right.
It's a little nonsense,
One thing.
but I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Step one.
Well, and that comes down to a question that I'm wondering about, which is how to find the courage to step outside of your comfort zone and try something new, because a lot of people are paralyzed by that thought.
That's right.
And so what did it take for you? Like, what is the kind of pre-formula that helps you feel like, I can do this? I'm going to give it a shot.
So I'm so happy you asked that, because I think people get really hung up on success, right? They're like, what does success look like? Success is, for example, I'm going to launch my own fashion line. And it's going to be a Nordstrom. And I said, whoa, slow the phone. How about, rather than even getting out of your comfort zone, you add on to your comfort zone. Okay. So think of it like not your home remodel, which is spectacular, but most people, when they remodel a home, they add like a room onto their house. So think about it that way, where you've got a house or a shed and you want to add a room to the shed. Okay. That's not as scary, right? If you want to demolish your house and rebuild, that's actually terrifying. And Sarah has built this amazing mansion by herself, but I could never do this. If someone asked me, Donna, remodel a house, I would add a room to it and I would shovel all my, closet stuff in there. So that is how you add on to a comfort zone. You say, I'm going to add one thing to my life right now. I'm not going to change my life. I'm not going to go take up a whole new thing. So for example, say you're someone who wants to explore a different career or build a side hustle or do something. Do the very first bare minimum step, right? Is that watching a video? Is that taking one course? Is that making one tote bag if you want to be a fashion designer? If you want to launch a podcast, it's like do a series. Don't say, I'm going to launch a podcast that will run forever. Be like, I'm doing a 3-part series with 3 people I know on this specific topic. That's it. See if you like it. Figure out what the system looks like to you and say like, cool, we're audio only with these 3 people I know around these topics. And so give yourself that space to call something a series, an experiment, rather than a project, a process, a life change, anything like that.
Like seriously, I just like
Yeah.
felt weight come off of me.
Right.
You're like, this isn't for the rest of your life.
No.
Because I keep like, I need to get new equipment. I need
No,
to
you
learn about
don't.
this. And you're like,
No.
maybe this doesn't, who knows?
Maybe not.
I don't know what
I
this
mean, maybe you want to do this for 20 years and maybe you want to do a 5-part series so you can learn and make new friends and amplify the voices of people you know.
Yeah.
And that it's just for, it's that whole thing, a reason, a season, or for life. Not everything has to be for life. Most things should be for a reason. Like I recorded this podcast to, get out of my own comfort zone, make some friends, amplify. A season, meaning this summer, this year, this 5-year period, or for life. But very few things actually are for life, like very, very few. And I think we as adults really get suckered into this concept that I started a thing at 22, I must do it till I die. And I don't understand why, because even careers, right? Would you let an 18-year-old choose your career? You shouldn't.
Yeah.
But we do. We do. We let an 18-year-old decide what we're going to do when we're 65. This is a terrible idea. Right? 18-year-old, we didn't know anything. I think we can all agree.
Yeah.
None of us at 18.
But it's an antiquated notion that has gone by the wayside.
Right.
Like people back in the 50s,
Yes.
you had a career.
A career.
And you did that.
Yes.
And the idea of people in the 90s and 2000s
No.
having multiple careers
Yeah.
just blew the
Blew
minds
the
of the
minds.
generation before
But you
them.
have to understand where it came from, where people drop dead at age 40.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you get one career because you're going to only live to be 20 years. So yeah, if you do a career for 20 years, that feels okay. I'm there, right? But by now we'd be dead. So when we live to be 120 on average, right? Like when we're going to all live hopefully longer, Weller.
I English good.
Yeah, seriously. But there's no way we're going to do the thing we did at 18 for the next 100 years. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe in serial careers, but I also believe in parallel careers where there is an overlap, right? Where it's very hard to say, I'm going to do tech for this many years, drop it completely, pick up a whole new thing from scratch and do that one. So that's
That
why
is
the overlap.
terrifying.
It's terrifying. And that's why what you're doing is really, really good, where you are adding on to the comfort zone. So you're saying like, okay, I'm going to dip my toe into the water of podcasting. Donna's going to dip her toe into the water of fashion design. See if this is a thing that I even want to do going forward, right? Do I like this? Do I like how I feel? Do I like the relationships I build? Do I like the outcome? And if you do, then it's like, cool, maybe I can do this.
Maybe I'll invest my time.
Exactly. Energy, attention, all of these things. And honestly, the reason I started my fashion company, launched properly in 2019, was I want to say when I'm 50 years old that, I have a company that I've been running for 10 years. Because by the time I run a company for 10 years, I should probably suck at it less. Right now, I still kind of suck at it. But I'm hoping, in 10 years, I kind of know what I'm doing, right? Know what to write off, know what to hire, know what to not hire. But you kind of have to go for it at the beginning to answer your question, but knowing it's not fatal, right? It's an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
If you phrase everything as an experiment, it doesn't even matter. Like, I'm going to experimentally do this podcast. I'm going to experimentally go to fashion school. I'm going to experimentally take a cooking class. Whatever it is, just an experiment, even to yourself. And I prefer to keep it on the DL, honestly. I don't want to tell anyone until I'm like, okay, cool, experiment success. I want to go do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is what helps me, is just take the pressure off rather than it being like some big commitment that you have to make.
Yeah, I think people have a hard time conceptualizing that they don't have to buy in.
No.
From the beginning.
You don't. But it's beaten into us from when we're kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if you're going to try out for baseball, you have to like be fully into baseball because we're going to have to do it for the next 10 years. Why? Go play one baseball game. If you hate it, never do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this really interesting concept in the world where when you're a kid, you really have to commit for large amounts of time, right? You go to school for 12 years and then college for 4. And if you drop out, it's like, oh my God, it's really beaten into us that long-term commitment to random things
Equals success.
equals success. Yeah. And the amount you change from when you're 5 years old to 15, what the heck? Why
Yeah.
would you like that thing? But you loved baseball when you were a kid. Like, okay, but you're now 15 years old.
Yeah, some time
Right.
has passed.
Yeah. But, I hear parents say it to their kids all the time, but they're like, oh, when you were young, you used to really love soccer. How come you don't play it now? I'm like, well, you were 5 If you fell down, nothing happened. When you're 45, it's a little different.
It hurts a
Yeah,
lot, as it turns
exactly.
out.
But people say it all the time. It's like, you love to draw when you're a kid. Why don't you like it now? It's like, we're a little different.
A couple things have
Fundamentally
changed.
different people,
Yeah.
right? But I really do think as adults, we have to give ourselves more permission to play and say, I'm just going to play with this and see what happens. I'm going to do this experiment for my own curiosity, just satisfy my curiosity. And if it doesn't take, it doesn't take. If I'd gone to fashion school and hated it, I would have never told anybody, would have walked around with my horrible tote bag and said, well, I checked that off the list. Right?
Yep.
So I think it's a big, big mindset shift.
I love this message. The idea of just, I picked up on it, 10, 12 years ago when I was getting into like self-help type stuff, like the Tony Robbins type stuff, where it's like every year you need to like try something new, just to shake up the system. And I never really took it seriously. And over the last probably 5-8 years, I've started to really like a couple of things a year,
Right.
whether it's going to turn into something or not, don't care, just
Right.
trying something new.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. Stuff starts to just magically happen.
They
when
do.
you-
And often, I call it collecting the dots before you connect the dots.
that.
People are really into connecting dots. I'm like, what dots? Do you have any dots to connect? So be in the dot collecting business and say like, okay, this year I'm going to try a martial art. There's a dot. I'm going to try, starting a podcast. There's a dot. I'm going to try starting a, nonprofit, whatever it is. So collect these dots and just pile them up and then see where they go, right? That's where creativity comes in, is your brain goes into overdrive. Like, I have experience with this, and that, and they connect together. Like, for example, my day job right now is leading accessibility for Microsoft, which is a big job, very scary, lots and lots of impact. But a big thing I focus on is mindset and mental health as part of the job. And people are like, oh, we've never thought about accessibility as being in the mind. We always think of it as physical disability, right? Someone who's deaf or blind or in a wheelchair. But I think of it more like mental health or neurodiversity or these sorts of things. And I am one of the few people who focus on that. And I said, it's because it's a huge part of my other lives. It's a big part of my fashion company is, how do you get over the mindset? How do you get over imposter syndrome? How do you balance, your mental health while having these other things? So those dots really connect. But I had to have that external tech experience to even form like this new concept, right? So I'm a huge believer in being in the dot collecting business. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this. I may do nothing with it, but I want to collect that dot to see if it's something that I want to invest in more.
Yeah.
Yeah, something
get
that
the
resonates.
Exactly.
Get the exposure and then
Yeah.
let your creative self
Yeah.
meld it all together.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been a dot collector for a long time.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it.
Yeah, exactly. You just want the experience, right? And not everything has to become a thing. And we have to let go of that where, oh, I tried it, it didn't work, so I feel like a failure. Like, why? I went maybe 3-4 years ago to, it was like, acting class or something in Ballard. I went to 2, hated it so much. I thought I would like it. Honestly, I thought I'd like it. I'm like, oh, cool stage, you get to do this. But it just didn't resonate with me for whatever reason. And I quit. Like,
You
2
graduated.
Tried it.
Yeah, I graduated, right? Graduated. I said, you know what? I've done it. I can check this. My curiosity is fulfilled. We as humans are more tormented by the things we didn't try that we really wanted to than things we tried and didn't like,
That's a really good point.
right? We're really, everything, it's like, what do you regret most? That list is long.
I didn't do this.
Yeah, I
try
didn't do that. Yeah. But it's like, what do you regret actually doing? That list is not that long.
Yeah. And
Right.
even most of those situations, I look
Yeah.
back and go, but I'm here today
Yes,
because I did
because of
that
that.
stupid thing.
Right.
I learned and I
Right.
moved forward.
Exactly. But we're tormented by the things we haven't done yet because of our own issue. And we're always held back for like exactly 5 reasons. 1, I don't have time. I'm like, actually, you do have time. 2, I don't have energy. I'm like, actually, you do have energy. 3, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I'm like, you need to do nothing with it. 4, what are people going to say? I'm like, which people? That's when I push them. What are people going to say? I'm like, which people? Oh, my mom, my dad, my friend, that guy from work. I'm like, do you think they're thinking about you? They're like, what are they thinking about you? They're like, oh, they think, Chris or Donna or Sarah or whoever are losers. I'm like, really? What did they say recently that makes you think that? They're thinking about you right this second. And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. No one is thinking about you that much. Right? As soon as you realize no one's actually thinking about you that much, it's freeing, actually.
I was going to say there's a lot of freedom in this.
It's a lot of freedom. No one actually, honestly, no one gives a shit what anyone else is doing.
If you're not hurting other people,
No,
it's like, yeah,
it doesn't
do your thing.
matter. Just do your thing. And then the fifth thing that is always an issue is, I am afraid, fundamentally afraid that I don't know how to start. I don't know where this will go. I am my biggest enemy. I'm like, look, the biggest enemies we have are within. They're not outside. And this voice in my head telling me that I'm a loser. And I'm like, write it down. Where did this voice come from? Is this actually true? Do you have facts? So I always check people. They're like, oh, I'm going to be bad at this. I said, where's your information?
What's the data that
Right.
pointed you?
Where's
at
the
that?
data? Show me the data. Show me the data and I'll believe you. In the court of law, show me the data that proved you to believe this to be a fact. So unless there's actual factual scientific data that proves this to be true, it is bullshit and it is in your head.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work in the last few years about retraining
Yes.
my inner voice.
Right.
And one of the things I have is this awesome playlist on Spotify that I call Boss Lady Power.
I love it.
And if you can get done listening to that playlist and not feel better
Yeah.
about your life, like
You got
have
nothing.
no soul.
No, you have no soul.
But then, talking with Chris about like the negative things you say
Yes.
to yourself,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I am my own worst, or
Yes.
I was my own worst critic,
Yes.
and I would say horrible things to
Yes.
myself that I would never say to
No.
anybody else. And I started, every time that I would hear myself say something crappy about myself, I would counter it with an argument that
Right.
I knew was factual.
Right.
Like, actually, I can do that.
Yes.
Actually, I can do that.
Right.
And I've gotten to the point where I am now my best cheerleader
Right.
in my head. And it is so empowering.
It's so empowering.
Because I'm just like, oh shit, I can do anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Walking down the
Absolutely.
street,
Yeah.
like, what's my theme
Yeah.
song? Like, brick
Yeah.
house. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's like that concept of when you don't know what to do, write down the advice you'd give your best friend
Mm-hmm.
and then do that. Don't get creative and do something else. Just do that.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to your best friend in this situation? What would you do in this situation? What would you ask your best friend to do? Just follow that advice.
Mhm.
We give amazing advice to others and we're so shit at following it.
Yep.
So I, like you, talk to myself. I'm like, you got this. Obviously, I'm my best hype girl
Mhm.
and it helps so much
Oh,
because you need that voice in your head.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't need somebody telling you
No.
that you can't do something. You have that all over the world
You
all the
have it
time.
all the time.
And that, having a 17-year-old daughter,
Yes.
that is what I pump into her
Yes.
all the time. You
Right.
can do whatever you want.
Anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
So,
Yeah.
like,
It's
how
so
could I
true.
teach that if I don't live it?
No, you can't. And so much of it is you don't even know subliminally like what you're saying, right? Until you start having just like positive vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And people who give off positive vibes, everyone picks up on it, right? And you can tell if someone has low self-esteem even if they say the right words because they don't give off those incredibly positive vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important for next generation.
Oh,
of
100%.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm really glad to hear it. I
Which
love
is-
the playlist idea.
Oh, do you want it? I'll share it with you.
Yeah.
I'll
Which
put
is
it up on the
Which is
website.
ironic. We were talking about that earlier today. This episode is actually going to be called Boss Lady Power.
I love it. That is awesome.
Which comes
That is
from
awesome.
the shirt.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
that I have.
armoire shirt.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I'll tell you one thing that's been fascinating to me is people are like, I struggle with envy and jealousy. I see other people striving or achieving things, and I'm just full of jealousy or envy. And I have a formula for them. And
Oh, this is good.
I have a formula for everything. Okay, just so you know, because I am an engineer. If there's no formula, it did not happen.
Give me the algorithm.
I'm like, I need the algorithm and I need some facts. So here it is. Like, if you're jealous of somebody, you ask yourself 3 questions. Who are the 3 people in their life who are their ride or die? They can call at 3 a.m. from Idaho saying, pick me up. 3 people. I want names. And where is that information? Or are you guessing? Okay. Question 1. Question 2. What is their biggest fear? Terrified of? Keeps them awake at night.
All right.
If you don't know the answer to that question, go find out. And the third one is, what is their wildest ambition?
What's
If-
interesting is it feels a whole lot like you just humanized someone.
Yeah.
In just an
Yeah.
algorithmic way.
Exactly. So you say, if you cannot answer these 3 questions about them, you don't get to be envious because you don't know fuck all about this person.
It's a really solid point.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because it's funny, especially most of us work in big tech. So
Right.
obviously Bellevue's very expensive
Right.
now.
Very.
We have lots of friends
Yes.
who've done very well for themselves. It's funny to me because
Yes.
I have friends all over the spectrum
Yes.
from blue collar to
Yes.
obscenely wealthy.
Obscenely.
by percentage, I would say the folks with the most money in the least direction are the most unhappy I know.
By far. By far.
It's like, yeah, they've got cars and houses and boats and
Yes.
stuff, but it's like,
Yeah. And is their biggest fear losing all that? Do they have any ride or dies? What is their biggest ambition? Have they crossed it and they haven't thought of anything else? So mine is, I don't get envious or jealous. I don't compare with others because until I know those answers, I know those answers for me. But if I don't know those answers, I actually don't get to compare and I don't get to be jealous. And whenever someone's like, oh my God, I'm so envious of you, I'm like, okay, who are my 3 ride or dies? They're like, I'm like, you don't know. You don't know anything about me to be envious. All you see is the external. And I call bullshit on it. If you're going to be envious of the whole fucking thing, right? You don't get to be envious of part-time.
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Until you know
The whole
someone-
fucking thing. So you got to know the whole thing. And if you don't know my biggest fear, sorry, you don't get to be envious of me, right?
really simplifies things a lot. To
Yeah.
do.
But it works, right?
It does.
Now
It's-
it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not envious because I don't know.
Well, it's the same thing like when
Yeah.
people, all the politics these days
Yes.
and people screaming at each other about who's right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I found myself getting caught up
Right.
in these, like having conversations with myself about how I'm a terrible person
Right.
because of this or that.
Yeah.
And then I realized I'm letting somebody else's voice penetrate into my head
Right.
that I don't know anything about.
Nope.
Not negatively, but I don't respect them because I don't know them. I don't know them well enough to know.
You just don't know that information.
Like, why do I care? It's
Right.
the same reason I don't go to someone who weighs 500 pounds
Right.
for dieting advice. It's
No.
not a body shaming issue. It's just
No.
like, I'm looking for an expert in the arena.
Right.
You haven't embodied it. Like,
And honestly, it's like, I truly believe that the only thing you can control is yourself. So, this whole concept of if I go argue enough on Twitter, I'm going to change someone else's mind. And my question for that is, how's that going to make your life better? If you've changed the mind of one person and they've changed their behavior, is your life significantly better than it was before? How? Right? Unless that person is deeply close to you and their behavior is impacting you strongly. But a rando on Twitter's changing their lifestyle or changing their political point of view is not actually going to improve your life.
you're
in
still
any
getting up
way.
and going to work tomorrow.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. You're still doing exactly what you did before. So that's why I have reached this point, and I think like Keanu Reeves said this, okay, to be clear, which is if someone says right now 4 + 4 is 5, he says, okay, cool, and walks away.
Yeah.
He said, I don't need this because why am I arguing with random people with the very limited minutes I have left?
yeah, my most
Yeah.
finite resource,
Right.
my most important
Yes.
resource, and I'm wasting it
Yes.
arguing with you about basic mathematics.
Exactly. It does not matter.
That
Like,
in your heart is
right. It doesn't
is
matter.
what it is.
Right. And if you choose to believe what you choose to believe, everything we choose to believe is, a mathematical equation of every single thing we've ever experienced. No one else believes everything you believe because they haven't had exactly that experience, but that's a good thing. So I've totally gotten over this idea of I need to convince even people in my life of my own beliefs and things because I'm like, why? They haven't had my experience. They have never walked in my shoes. They're not going to walk in my shoes. I don't actually want them to walk in my shoes. So why would I spend my energy and my time on that?
Yeah.
Yep.
The
Well, it's-
hardest. Oh,
Go ahead. Go ahead. babe.
Oh, I was just gonna say the hardest part for me in that arena of like people's perception is when someone has an incorrect perception of me.
Right.
Where
Yes.
I'm like, I
Yes.
need to fix this.
Right.
This is, and
Yeah.
it's like, it's this all-consuming drive,
Right.
And I can't let go of it.
No. But you know what? Other people's opinion is their own business.
None of my business.
Not your business. Not your circus, not your monkeys.
Yep.
Right? So true.
It's
Not
almost like
your-
I've been saying that.
I was
Yeah.
going to say, did we get that from you or did you get that from us? I'm not.
I don't know. Not your circus, not your monkeys.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Doug.
There are people who's like, oh, you're a person who's blah. And I'm like, not really true. I'd love to see the facts on that.
Yeah, show me the
I,
data.
I get really factual really fast when it comes to these things. I'm like, where's the information? Oh, that one time you did blah, blah, blah. I'm like, where? When? Etc. And if it's important, if it's a weird perception like, that they have and doesn't actually affect you day to day, then who the fuck cares, honestly? If it's your boss, your partner, your parent or something, and it affects you, then it's good to just check them on the perception. I don't even correct people. I'm like, what makes you say that? So I just dig in a little bit, right? Where it was maybe 2.5 years ago. I was switching jobs. Someone asked me to take a job. And when I was just, ramping up on the team, he says to me, is running a clothing line going to get in the way of doing this job? Because this is a really hard job. My first reaction is to say, WTF are you talking about? You asked me to take this job and now you're questioning me, right? Which was to, reply in anger and defensiveness. Instead, I'm like, stop, don't do it. You don't know where it's coming from. So then I say, okay, I'd love to understand why you're asking this question. Curious. And he said, oh, because, I see on Twitter and Facebook and all this that, you run this fashion line, it seems to take up a lot of your time. And I said, right. And I said, I noticed you talk a lot about your children and Xbox problems. That seems to take up a lot of your time. So do you feel that that gets in the way of your career? He said, no, of course not. Like, kids are just like part of life. But when I'm at work, I'm at work. I'm like, exactly. And he said, oh, but that helped him never ask that question again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's really important not to call people out, but to call them in, right, in this way. Because I didn't want to put him on the defensive. It was more like making him check his biases on why are you asking me this question? Because you have this idea that running a fashion line is harder than having children, which is factually untrue. I can tell you that is true because I know people who have children way more time than running a fashion company who, does not argue with me, does not fight with me, does not have emotions, does exactly what I say. Very predictable, unlike all of your children. And all of you with kids are laughing because you're like, yeah, I should have run a fashion line instead of having kids. But you know what I mean, right? So whenever people ask you these like totally weird questions, just ask them, why are you asking me this? I'd love to understand. And just debug it. Right?
Yeah.
Just get into...
Take the emotion out.
Just take the emotion out. Just debug it.
The hardest part that I've found is when you get that information secondhand.
Right.
So you can't address it.
No.
And you're just like, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, you do nothing with it. Because if it's secondhand.
Yeah.
So there you go. Right?
Let it go.
Let it go. Unless it affects you, right? In which case, I think it's really important to go and talk about it directly with the person, not through secondhand, is to say, hey, I just love to talk about, just frame the concept and say, I would love to talk to you or get your advice on this thing. I always seek advice rather than telling people. So I'll say like, okay, I've been hearing that some people think I might be too X or I might be not into X. I'd love to understand like, where do you think that perception's coming from? And what do you think I can do to overcome that perception? Because it's not actually true because of X, Y, and Z. Right?
I love that.
So seek out the advice because people are like, I shall give advice. And, they get really invested in your success when you seek someone out for advice rather than to confront them. So when I learned that some upper management type who actually need to like me doesn't, whatever reason, I go and say like, look, here's what I'm trying to do. I don't think I'm succeeding as much as I want to. I'd love to get your advice, who's obviously an expert in the space, on how I can do that. Then they're wholly and completely invested in the success.
You've paid them a huge compliment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And you don't have to go like overboard on that, but it's more about stating why you're talking to them, which is obviously they're an expert in the space, which is why they have an opinion in the first place, even if they're not. But they are suddenly, people will be what you tell them they are, right? And say, you are an incredible mentor. You're an expert in the space. I would love to get your advice.
It's hard to be mad at that. You're like,
Yeah.
oh,
I am
thank
that.
you.
I am very helpful and an incredible mentor
let
and
me
very
see
supportive.
how I can help you out.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a great little.
It's manifesting the reality
It
you want.
really is.
Exactly.
It's so about manifesting the reality you want.
Well, the one thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that is very exciting to me is you had another a business venture, if you will. You started. I don't know if you were voluntold or if you chased it yourself, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this program you did where you were doing basically the entrepreneurship program.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's tell people about that. And
Okay, so it all started when I took over this thing at Microsoft called the Windows Insider Program. It's a community of right now 20 million people all over the world who use early versions of Windows to live their lives, run their businesses, etc. It's very nerdy. Don't join unless you're really into debugging Windows. So I noticed that the number of Windows users in the world is 1 billion. The number of insiders is not very equally distributed. We have a huge number in US, UK, Australia, India, Brazil, but nowhere else. Not in Africa, not in Latin America, not most of Asia. And I was wondering why that's the case, because people who are insiders, they tend to have a tremendous benefit because they get promoted in their careers because they know what's coming 6 months to 1 year ahead. So they grow in their careers more. They are less surprised by, PC updates and all of this stuff. So for me, it was an inequality thing. like, hey, maybe you all don't know the benefit because it would really help your careers. So I looked on a map, found a country with a lot of Windows users, Nigeria, 300 million people. And in there, the Windows usage was like an extraordinary large number. It was like 20 million people or something. It was a huge number. So I thought, wait, there's a huge country. They have like 12 insiders. Why is this true?
Yeah. Why are we not representing?
Why aren't we representing? The representation should be higher. So I pitched an experiment. Remember, no project, no process, no product, an experiment. I said, I would like to do a usability study in Lagos, Nigeria, where we have an office, to figure out, talk to a bunch of Windows users, figure out why they're not insiders. And my management said, okay, sounds interesting. I said, they obviously have money. They're Windows PCs. They're not upgrading and they're not pushing this out, which is something you want. So tie your experiment to the goal of the business, right? If you're working at a company, there's really only 4 goals. 1 goal, attract new customers. Goal 2, make more money from existing customers. Goal 3, attract new employees. Goal 4, make your existing employees more productive. That's it. There's only 4 goals of a business. There's literally no other goal. Every other goal, like do philanthropy, do this. No, all those tie up to make more money, right? That's all. That's the point. Or like get a bigger tax write-off so you can make more money. So it has to tie up to one of these goals. So I said, we have customers. We want to make more money from customers. It's been proven that insiders spend more money on hardware and office and all these subscriptions than anyone else. So let's make more money from this country of 300 million people in Nigeria. My management says, yeah, let's figure out how to make more money from these people. Yeah, do your usability study. I'm like, cool. So I said, I'm going to do this for 3 months and I will come back with an answer. And they said, okay, cool. So I rallied a team of people together, which was sketchy because the team is like, you want to do what? You have to get how many shots in their arms? I'm like, yeah, it's going to be fine. It's fine. We didn't know anything. We didn't know anything at the time. So we booked a travel with Microsoft in Nigeria. We went and got, 7 different vaccines, and everyone complaining about vaccines. I'm raising an eyebrow at you because I have like hepatitis A, B, yellow fever, malaria. Like I have vaccines you ain't never heard of, but I also have no diseases you ain't never heard of either. Just pointing that out, right?
Causation?
So, exactly. So I am beyond vaccinated at this point. We get on a plane, we go there. Well, on our very first trip, we learn, they say, yeah, we all work in an office and we all use technology, but the number one job in Nigeria is entrepreneurship. And it doesn't matter if you work at Microsoft Nigeria, you have a side hustle. So everyone has a business. Everyone has, even if you work in the government in an office, you have your own side business. And I thought, this is the market I need.
Yeah.
This is my audience right here because this is unique. It's not the case in the US. Not everyone has their own business, but 100% of people in Nigeria run their own business. So even people in the office are like, yeah, I have a real estate. I sell things online. I provide the service. I rent out scooters. I'm like, really? They said, yeah, because this country is extremely expensive to live in. I'm like, interesting. So it was a very new concept for me that everybody in Microsoft Nigeria had a side business, profitable. And they said, we actually make more money from that, but this is a more legit business. I said, interesting. So I said, all right, let's do a sample set. So let's start an entrepreneurship bootcamp here, source 25 people from very different parts of the country to come in and showcase what their business is and how they use technology. So that was the entrepreneurship program. We ran it for 6 months and we found so many interesting things about like battery, power, usage of tech, what they need, offline scenarios, all of these things. We came home, made product changes, experiment successful. And, our management started raising an eyebrow, like, what are you guys doing? Are you stupid? This has nothing to do with anything. But the biggest win, I would say, out of this whole program was we realized you people in this country are young, technical, the hustle is real, really smart. Why don't we hire you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of messing around with all this, why aren't we just hiring you? So we got approval from one of the upper management say, all right, we have an office, we have space, let's do an experiment and hire 20 people to work on one product team. Happened to be Windows at the time. And that's how Microsoft Africa, like it's called the ADC Africa Development Center, started. It started off with this promise of 20 and then a bunch of management are like, wait. If we're hiring, I could use some headcount. And now there are 800 people in Lagos and 1,000 people in Kenya.
Because of your experiment.
Because of our experiment, yeah. But I will say in my entire career, that's probably the biggest tech impact I will ever have. But to this day, the number of people who said, Donna, what are you doing? This makes no sense. I'm like, doing an experiment.
Doing an experiment.
Doing an experiment.
And even if it had fallen on its face, you would have learned some
it's
cool
fine.
stuff.
I would have learned some cool stuff, come back and said, well, it turns out the bandwidth's not good enough to have insiders. Fair. But I needed to answer the question, right? So much of it is just fulfilling your curiosity and answering a question you have in your head. And maybe that was a reason. So this turned out to be a seasonal, right? It's not life. I'm not still doing it. I had a reason. Then it was a season and went on for 3.5 years. And now I've answered that question. So if we want to open an office in Jakarta, Indonesia, Buenos Aires, Medellin, we know how to do it. We have the playbook. Hire 20 people. How do they do? Cool. Hire 100 people. How do they do? Hire 500. Now, and see how they do. See how the area and the region resonates.
That is spectacular. And is that program still? I assume Microsoft's probably still leveraging
Oh
that
yeah.
program.
So we actually keep hiring. My boss currently just went and came back from a tour. She said, "Did you know we have so many engineers in the region?" I said, "Yes, I do."
I'm intimately
I got an
familiar
origin
with it.
story about that. But we actually hired so many people, we had to build our own office in both of the cities, in both Lagos and Nairobi. Yeah. So the plan is to have thousands of people in both of these places, but it's not weird offshore work. It's brand new products from scratch. So a ton of Azure services for Microsoft, a ton of mixed reality, future Web 3.0 stuff. So it's all future stuff, but they've realized that if this technology can work in like a low bandwidth situation, you can work anywhere in the world.
Exactly. All of a sudden, we can get tech from everywhere.
Exactly.
And different
Yeah.
cultures,
Yes.
they play
Yeah.
into tech differently.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah. And the time zone
Really
works
changing
really
the
well
landscape.
for most of the world. So
And you
yeah.
can move to the Bahamas for 6 months
That's
out of the year.
exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah. So pandemic actually made the Africa offices really real because we're all working from somewhere random. So why not?
Yeah. It's changed the paradigm. It's so awesome.
yeah, COVID has been brilliant for the work from home
Yes.
side of things.
Yeah. It is funny to see people that we haven't seen in 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
and they find out what we've been up to and they're like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
Wow. Yeah. You've rebuilt a house. You've like totally changed your lives completely. Yeah. It was a great disruption, but
COVID's been a great experiment for us.
yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Not always the most popular thing to say, but it
No.
was our experience. So,
Yeah.
well, I think that's covered what I want. Is there things you want to talk about? I'd love to
No.
have you come back. This is just beginning.
Yeah.
I do want to dig in on the tech side. Just
I've
right
got
now,
some things too. Yeah.
I just everywhere I look right now, it's like, oh, I want to talk to this person about that.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I figured I was gonna have to put together like 20 or 30 episodes, get like a good footprint, and then like woo you, convince you. Like,
No,
it's worth the
I
time.
am
Come
convincible.
talk to me.
I'm willing to do the experiment. I love a good experiment. And this is obviously what you're doing and always happy to participate.
This is awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Yeah. Thank you.